So, good evening, friends, and welcome to another session of the book discussion forum. So, last time around, we had dealt with the introduction to this book of Jean Drèze, that is Sense and Solidarity. Today, we will take a look at the first chapter. Now, I'm sure once you'll have read the first chapter, you would have found it very touching and very interesting in itself. So, without any further delay, let us begin with this first chapter. I'm sure that when you look up drought and hunger, this topic on the internet, I'm sure there are various pictures from all around the world that really touch our hearts, that really bring out the emotions within us. And in this first chapter, in a way, once you read it, you basically realize that whatever has been sort of written, the research, the findings of Jean Drèze really do touch certain aspects of our lives. Because when we read it, we do feel that, there is some kind of injustice, there is some kind of inequality that is taking place. People have been deprived of their rights. And as a result of it, we see that the topics that he gives for these essays, basically all would have realized that the first chapter is kind of a collection of essays on various topics. And rightly so, each of these topics do really touch the nerve and do really make us think as to what else can we do to alleviate this problem. So the first chapter is titled Drought and Hunger. Now, basically we see that this chapter is a collection of essays. And as you would have noticed, it begins on a very grim note. Now, he says that he speaks about stories of drought and hunger in the early 2000s. And mostly this area of research or this area of finding is based on his study in Central and North India. And in a way, the first essay, that is Starving of the Poor, in a way is a critique of the accumulation of excess food grains by the government of India in early 2001. Now, he goes on to say that stockholding of food grains was approaching 50 million tons. That was about 10 quintals per household. And as a result of this, we see that there were many people in the country who were not getting enough. Okay, some of them were literally starving to death. And therefore, as we come to the first essay, we will realize what exactly he means by starving the poor. Now, we also see that the government's gigantic hoarding of food grains, okay, which in a way did cause a lot of discomfort for many. It wasn't that there was a shortage of food grains, but once again, we see that various factors such as corruption were influential in the poor suffering or the poor being oppressed in this situation. At the same time, the author tells us that he would often discuss these issues with his friends. He mentioned certain names in the first chapter over there. And he says that with all of these friends who were quite influential people, that means who are of the same mindset. Some of them were lawyers, and together they filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court. And he says that over the year, the case had a bearing on many of the social programs which are discussed, and especially with regards to the midday meal, the integrated child development services, and the public distribution services. So he goes on to say that, meanwhile, however, people continued to grow hungry in the shadow of this gigantic stockholding of food grains. And here we see that the essays basically consist of some of the accounts of the living conditions of the people in some of the poorest states of India, especially Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha. Everywhere, he says that there was a striking shortage of social support for the vulnerable groups. And in a way, he says, in India, drought is basically a time of relief that brings about social and political change. It's a time of distress which leads to some kind of political or social change. And therefore, the events that took place from the year 2001 till 2003 led to many lessons being learned. At the same time, there was a lot of political mobilization, public mobilization, and this also gave way to various schemes which were then introduced for the people. Now, as we know, the reality, schemes are introduced, but they rarely reach the intended target. So after having seen this, let's come to the first essay in this first chapter, that is Starving the Poor. So here he speaks about the food subsidy scam. And he says that under the whole umbrella of food security, the government was keeping millions of tons of food, which in turn led to starvation for the poor. He says that even at the best of times, undernutrition is a problem that is quite prominent in the country. And the frequency of this problem does increase with the frequency of droughts. And therefore, he says that according to the National Family Health Survey of 98 to 99, said that about half of all Indian children are chronically undernourished. And in this way, we see that with drought affecting large parts of the country for 2 or 3 times in a row, undernourishment and starvation was on the increase. At the same time, he goes on to say how the government went on to spend around rupees 10,000 crores on the food subsidy. The common assumption being that it would help bring food within the reach of the people. And therefore, he says that the Food Corporation of India was accumulating grains. And actually what happened because of this is they were chiefly geared to keeping the food prices up rather than down. And as a result of this, therefore, we have now the food grain stocks approaching almost 50 million tons. And therefore, as the Indian public is used to large numbers, it may be easy in a way to lose sight of this great magnitude or this great scale. And therefore, he says that when we speak about the food subsidy, there are 2 main reasons why the food subsidy is so large. And one is the high operating costs of the Food Corporation of India. And this basically includes the cost incurred on storage of the grains as well. And he says that according to one estimate, these costs accounted for nearly half of the total food subsidy in the mid-1990s. Now, the second reason which he gives is that the Food Corporation of India was buying more food than it was selling it. And as a result, the difference was a net addition of stocks, which was growing by leaps and bounds. And therefore, what he tries to say is that ordinary households were benefiting very little from this subsidy. Now, you also had the public distribution of the food grains done by the public distribution scheme or the public distribution system. And this also wasn't very effective. Why? Because first and foremost, people would prefer to buy other food grains because the quality that they would get from the public distribution system was very low. And as a result of it, we see that people would often prefer to buy from elsewhere rather than buying from this public distribution system. Apart from that, we also see that there was a lot of food wastage. Why? Because since we see that a lot of food that was basically stocked, and we know what happens in in go downs and storerooms. Okay, there are many pests such as rats, worms, which basically affect the grains at one point of time or the other. So a lot of food was getting wasted in that way. Apart from that, there was a lot of food also being sold in the black market. So as a result of it, we had the food grains that were supposed to reach the intended audience did not eventually reach. And keeping it, hoarding it just led to wastage of these grains. So with that, one can ask the question, what prevents the government from using this mountain of grain to fund a constructive expansion of the public distribution system? So one of the possible reasons for this, he mentions, are political inertia. He also mentions organizational gaps and also reluctance to bear financial costs. And he says that if we remove these hurdles, something positive can take place. And therefore, removing these hurdles is one of the main issues of the political system of the country. However, he says that it would be a mistake to assume that with income generation programs, it would lead to more absorption of the existing food stock. Because if you look at the ratio of food consumption and rise in income, we see that with the rise in income, people are more likely to buy other items such as pulses, vegetables, milk, and other related items. But we see that the food grain consumption, he says, remains more or less unchanged. And this basically suggests that beyond a particular point, income generation programs will not help to resolve the fundamental imbalance between food grain demand and supply at the prevailing price. And therefore, we see that because of all these corruptions, because of all these leakages, if you would call them, within the system, the food then gets siphoned off and is sold at a much higher price in the black market. So it would also be good to look at the situation of farmers. Okay, as we know that they have not been doing too well in the recent years. And there was also a shortage or a slowdown of the agricultural growth in the 1990s, which was then followed by the widespread drought. And therefore, their livelihood is further threatened by imminent lifting of quantitative restrictions on agricultural imports, which have been imposed by the World Trade Organization. And he asked the question, against this background of the situation of the farmers, is it not imperative to sustain high food grain prices? So basically, he gives that two answers to this question. First, he says that the poorer sections of the farming community benefit very little from the price support measures. And therefore, he also speaks about certain disadvantages of storing food grains within the country. And whatever the pros and cons of lower food prices, he says, it is in any case not possible to sustain artificially high prices, which are short of destroying or exporting the surplus food. Which then brings us to the second topic, the second essay in the first chapter, that is fragile lifelines, robust oppression. So here he speaks about the starvation deaths in Kashipur. And as a result of this, he says that because of the starvation deaths, he had to basically go back to some of his field notes, which he had written some time back when he was visiting the Kalahandi, Bolangir, Koratpur region of Orissa. And he mentions about his journey in Kashipur. So first, he basically speaks about that he came across a man who was carrying a very heavy weight, and he had to walk 15 kilometers with that heavy load for just 12 rupees. And at that point of time, he says that rice was worth 10 rupees a kilo in the market. So less income for really hard labor. Apart from that, he also speaks of various prices of traditional livelihoods, especially in areas that used to practice shifting cultivation. And he basically cites various examples. He also speaks of an elderly man who basically said that in olden days, A single woman's work was enough to feed the family. Now, even if the whole family works, the family would go hungry. And therefore, what has basically led to this problem? Well, first and foremost, he says that massive environmental degradation. This has contributed to a loss of forest cover. And as a result of it, since the surrounding forests have been decimated, in some areas, these have been compensated by expansions of other occupations, such as weaving and cash crops. But elsewhere, labor migration was the overwhelming survival strategy. He says that another prime cause of economic backwardness was exploitation and corruption. And he says that the local Adivasis and Dalits are literally sitting ducks for these unscrupulous traders, money lenders, contractors, and bureaucrats. Now, here he gives a very interesting example. He says that he happened to meet a contractor who was a fresh graduate from St. Stephen's College in Delhi. And so this contractor was given a commission. And this contractor was basically discussing that he would have to give around 3% for the BDO, 5% for the junior engineer, 5% for the Gram Panchayat, and so on. And then the author happens to ask him, what if the BDO, for example, or what if the junior engineer was a very honest person? And to everyone's surprise, and even to my surprise, the contractor says that if the person was honest, he would take and stick to his 3%. That means he would not say that, okay, I don't want any of this money. He would stick to his 3% and move on. And therefore, we see that because of these leakages, so we see that a certain amount is dedicated for a particular project, especially to help the poor. But because of these leakages, we find that very little eventually reaches them. I'm reminded of a diagram which was very popular a few years ago. It shows the whole tree wherein you have various things, it's like it's water flowing and you have various leakages at various points. So there's a full flow of water starting from the tap, but the time it reaches to the poorest of the poor, it's just one drop, because at every particular place, there's been leakages and things have gone out of hand. So he also speaks about the condition of local public services. So a lot of vacant posts in schools, health centers, administrative offices. And he says that apart from the midday meal program, there is no particular positive in the local public services. And therefore, he says that the public distribution system also had a lot of flaws. So one of the main reasons for this is the problem in the ration system. First and foremost is people were not made aware of. And as a result of it, those who are basically in charge of distributing these resources would either cheat the people by giving them half of what they're supposed to receive, or would give them things at a much higher price. And as a result of it, we see that he saw that in two villages, people's ration cards, those who were in the average below poverty line had received 50 kilos of rice for 12 months instead of receiving 120 kilos. And therefore, because of this defective supply arrangements, there were a lot of people facing a lot of problem. And on the other hand, people also had given up, because he also mentions one woman who said, there is no point in complaining because nobody's going to listen to us. And then he basically speaks about the right to food and public accountability. Here he speaks about the situation in Surgura district in Chhattisgarh. He says that in the month of October, everything seems to be lush green, lush forests, and clear streams. Everything appears good. But at other times of the year, it's a harsh struggle for survival. He basically says that yields are low and most farmers are unable to grow food crops in order to cover their sustenance needs. And therefore, when the food runs out, they are forced to migrate in search of work. Those who are unable to migrate try to manage by keeping a little livestock, selling wood, or doing something else. And he basically says that hunger is widespread and also leads to various diseases as such. At the same time, we see that the development programs there aren't adequate enough. He also speaks about the non-functional of the public distribution systems. Though he says that there are many things which have actually been introduced in the village, like the installation of hand pumps, etc. He says that because of corruption and exploitation, things don't look that good. And he basically says that the public distribution service or the public distribution system is virtually non-functional. He says that ration cards are full of blank entries. And the main reason he says is that the poor are unable to overcome all the hurdles involved in drawing their rations. He gives a very interesting example that in a particular village, there is one ration shop which is like 12 kilometers away. The shop opens 2 or 3 days each month. Now, the opening time depends on the owner and is very unpredictable. Sometimes he says that the people walk the half a day to reach that place. They go there, either the shop is closed or the grain has run out. And therefore, because of such kind of thing, such kind of negligence on the part of those who are involved in the public distribution system, and as well as because the people are not made aware, we see that they are unable to sort of fight for their rights, and they are basically sort of led to be content with whatever is happening. Now, at the same time, we see that in many of the disadvantaged area, the public simply does not have enough means in order to resist this fraud. A lot of fraud, a lot of corruption is taking place, but all this goes along because nobody is able to sort of fight for their rights. At the same time, here he suggests a kind of a carrot and stick method for the public distribution system. And here he basically says that all this corruption, all these problems are basically taking place because in a way, people are not being compensated. So even those who are involved in the public distribution system are not able to get enough for their sustenance. And as a result of it, he says that because of this, they have to basically resort to such methods. So by the carrot and stick method, we see he says that certain incentives have to be given to those handling ration shops. And at the same time, firm action also should be taken on corrupt dealers. He also says that the Gram Panchayat and the Gram Sabhas should be empowered to appoint and dismiss ration shop operators. And apart from this, he says that various policies, for example, the right to food calls, for greater attention from popular organizations and social movements. And finally, we come to the memories of Kusu Matan. Now here he says that in 2002, they were overwhelmed by thousands of poor people who had assembled for a public hearing on hunger and the right to food. And this had basically been called upon because there were 3 starvation deaths that were reported in this place of Kusu Matan. Now he says that they as a team had visited this place for three times prior to that. And therefore a survey was conducted on 21 randomly selected households. And based on this survey, based on these findings, we see that there are certain incidents, especially in this essay, that really do touch us and really do make us wonder as to what is really happening to the status of the schemes for the marginalized, as well as it also shows the gravity of corruption and irresponsibility on the part of those who are responsible for carrying out certain action. So here he says that out of the 75 houses, a study was done taking 21 households, 21 families. And he basically says that uh, these people earned very little by cultivation and collecting tendu leaves and casual labor. And as a result, he says that local employment opportunities were also very limited. And most of the households find it hard to survive during the lean months. Food shortage was one of the main purpose of certain deaths caused by starvation. And he also mentions how the people survive. They basically eat broken rice, which is then supplemented with whatever wild food may be available, such as a wild spinach, a local tuber, etc. And then he says that once this gets over, then again, the people have to go in search of food. He also speaks of 20 out of the 21 households often skipped meals because there was nothing to eat. He then speaks about expenditure on non-food items. And he says that if you visit the houses of these people, they have barely nothing. Even the clothes are basically brought or bought once a year. They use sand or ashes to wash, and they do not have any luxuries. They said only 2 households out of 21 had adult members wearing chappals. And many houses contained nothing other than basic cooking utensils. So this basically gives a very grim picture of the situation of or the living conditions of the people there. And here he also says that the living conditions of the people are really unsuitable. First and foremost, he says that people are unable to offer you the simplest of refreshment. Even the water, they are unable to offer because it's polluted. And therefore, for the concern of the person who has come, they don't offer. He also mentions that laughter of children is hardly heard, and very few can be seen playing or running around. And apart from that, there are also various diseases and various mental illnesses that have affected the people. As a result, he says that because of all these factors, the 3 people had starved to death. And these deaths, he says, related by their surviving relatives are because of extreme symptoms of endemic hunger in the area. And then he goes to give several examples of people who were unable to sort of, meet their daily needs. And therefore, he says that life in Kusumatan is a vicious circle of poverty, hunger, illiteracy, and powerlessness. Many people have no notion of their rights and entitlements. And he says that the government is an abstract entity with little bearing on the lives of the people. And having said this, we can finally move to the last chapter, which is the dark well of hunger. And here he basically speaks about the Chambal area of MP. And he says that as they travel deeper into the village, he says that the problems of people tend to intensify. He speaks about the appalling living conditions. And according to certain reports, there were around 52 starvation deaths that had occurred in the recent months. One of the main reasons was malnourishment. And all of this, he says that because the conditions are not that great, crops have withered, traditional sources of livelihood have also been lost. And as a result of this, we see that people are really struggling to make ends meet. So this, my dear friends, is basically my understanding or my exposition of the first chapter. We can now listen to what all of you have to say. So Jito, maybe we can start with you.
True, as you have rightly said, okay, even I was totally disturbed. I was totally disturbed, especially see, you have covered entirely the full chapter with the incidents that are very much what I have also felt touched upon. Let's take on the first chapter, as you said, that the percentage of commission going to the different places, 22%. When you calculate each and every 5, 5, 2, 2, and 3 now, it goes to 22%. If you do a cumulative calculation without even reaching for 4 years time, cumulative interest rate, it is double the money. So I was really disturbed, especially when he was telling, the contractor was telling Stephen from the school of Stephen. And the other place wherein he has to walk, the people had to walk almost 12 kilometers for the public distribution system to get the rice. And when they reach there, they don't have anything to get it. Something really troubled me. Yeah, true it is. We are talking about the time of 2000. True. But even now, it was not the inadequacy of the initial the statement from the very beginning when he was building up the story or the situation. He has built up the story where the absolute excess of our food grains capacity. Okay, that is where it came from. And the last one, especially the village where they're saying only 2 people had the chapel, okay, 2 households, and that was totally disturbing sight actually when he had walked from that place to another place. It was totally a disturbing state of affair that I was really touched by this one. So one thing I was going through, it was that one, okay. See, I did get an opportunity to walk across go across the country in different platforms and go to the villages and rural places. And actually, that also motivated me to get into this line of profession. So I never expected to go this much of a grave situation. For me, that was troubling me. Okay, the people with the food shortage and the poverty, people are dying. Starvation. People are dying of starvation. That was really something taken me for a toll for the day to day, honestly. Thank you for the presentation. Very well done. And you have very nicely covered all the aspects. And you have picked up the crux of the theme, I would say, rather say. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chito. Sebastian, would you like to share some of your insights on this first chapter?
Yes, Father. Just I was going through all the chapters, first chapters, and I found like a essay type, and then she just brought out different segments. Like, I was taken up by the last one. Like last one was like a clear picture of the village, where he describes, he went with other, other companions or those who made survey, and then found out that how the villagers people are living, and then without getting any help from the government, and they are managing to stay and surviving and struggling with their lives. However, they are working, but they are getting very little, and with that they are managing. And when I think about that, that pictures comes, the place they live may be very rural interior area, that is maybe very far from this, a city we can think of, where people know it's completely and totally deprived of their rights. Like we think of 5 basic needs, for their shelter, clothes, and all that is treatment. And then for the survival also, it is thinking that means how they go through this the struggle in their lives, that they have only few meals a day, and then the people are there at home, those who are sick, and then sometimes in a family we can see here that the woman is taking care of the family, the husband is sick, not able to work, and then the woman is taking care, is taking all the responsibilities, and even to look after the children. And children also don't have any scope about education, and they also, because of this undernourishment, they also suffer. This one was very touchy, On the other hand, I also seen that that particular village where he mentions, people have to go to collect their food, and then this is 12 kilometers away. That incident also where this government also taking the initiative to provide food, but the supplement is not done properly. I mean, people are not aware when it is distributed and for the welfare of people, but it is done for the sake of their own self, one's own profit. Whether people get or not, that doesn't matter, or it doesn't bother them. And that one also means touched me, that how people means working for the others, but for the namesake, for the profit of their own self, without informing the others, or without means without their generous heart. They're coming forward but not helping them. And when it is opened or when it is closed, it's not informed. I mean, that also brings out my notice actually. And other things also that about the farmers, from farmers, how they work hard, they cultivate, but at the end they have to sell their products to particular means this businessmen, because they cannot sell to others. And in this process, they don't get means what they should get. And on the other hand, they also suffer, because at the end they have to buy for their survival. And at the end, we find them there. They are the one who produce the crops. They are the one suffer at the end. So these are the things, I mean, these few points touched me actually from this first chapter.
Just to add a few of my insights apart from the exposition of the chapter, I would also like to say that in a way it's saddening to see that people are sort of willing to kind of exploit uh, the conditions of others. So for example, I think one of the clearest examples given here is of that rationing system, wherein like people below the poverty line, they basically have nothing to eat, they're starving. And you have these people who are in charge of the PDS, the public distribution system, like opening the shop like once or three times a month, okay, and that too at their own sweet time. Apart from that, the amount of grains that got wasted because of the hoarding, okay, which was like it in a way it's a crime, because and also looking at the hardships that the people suffer. And I think one of the things is that we need more people sort of like Jean Drèze, people to sort of write such things and make others aware, because probably if you ask the common man, they will not be aware of all these things that are happening in the interior parts of the country. Okay, they say that there is poverty in the country, there are people below living below poverty line, but actually looking at the real suffering of the people is something which in a way, I think at least the four of us who are present here who have read this, in a way this chapter has touched us in some way or the other, and in a way it also motivated us to try to do something. Probably, like I remember in our province we basically have uh, an institute, the social service apostolate, wherein we tend to work with the local shepherds. And here we see that it's only once you work with the people that you understand the struggle of the people, and only then you can sort of cater to the needs of the people. Whereas sitting at the topmost positions in the country and not knowing anything and making policies for people without knowing for what they are making policies is something really saddening. And I think so, yeah, in a way, something actually is being done, but it's a sad reality that even during the time of the pandemic, we saw that people willing to make a profit of the misfortunes of others, which I think is very inhuman, very sad, and is something that is that needs to change if at all we are to develop as a nation.
The concern of the entire globe on food is something which I think needs to be looked at a very, very alarming or with a sense of great urgency. I do not know how there is this food organization at the global level, yet I'm not too sure we are making any headway. As long as autocratic governments are going to be there, it's going to be like that.
Thank you for those wonderful insights. And I'm sure as we continue reading the book, chapter by chapter, I think there will be more insights that we'll possibly gain in the entire matter. And of course, then that whole topic, the whole title, Sense and Solidarity, will make even more sense once we read the other aspects. So now the next book discussion forum will be on the 15th of November. Okay, that's a Monday. So, and for this, actually, I was thinking what we can do is, we can sort of nominate one member in order to take up the chapter and expose it. So, then the others, each one gets a chance to expose a chapter. And of course, today, because of exams and because of other things, we had very low attendance. So of course, in the next months, that would increase. So yeah. So thank you and have a good evening.
Good evening. Bye.
Thank you.